Hello and welcome to the garden. Well, earlier in the year I tried for the first time to graft my own tomatoes, and actually it went reasonably well, and I'll leave links to those videos in the description below if you're interested to see how I did it. What I thought I'd do in this video is take a look at those plants and compare them with some ungrafted plants. In the polytunnel here we've got the ungrafted plants, and in the greenhouses we've got the grafted ones. Now this polytunnel is in a new location, so this soil has never grown tomatoes before. In the greenhouses we're in soil which has grown tomatoes for quite some years now, and the reason I wanted to graft is because I'm growing these old heritage varieties, and there can be a build-up of soil-borne pathogens over the years, and I was starting to suspect that we were losing out on the vigor and the health of the plants, and that some of that could be carried from season to season in the soil. So those grafted plants, they're on a rootstock that helps you in two ways. One is the vigor of the plant, whether in terms of vegetative growth or then the energy that's put into the fruit. So potentially you may get a larger harvest, but for me the most important thing is the disease resistance that that rootstock can confer. So it's not a perfect comparison because the environment is slightly different in the polytunnel than the greenhouses. I'm pretty sure if I'd planted these ungrafted plants alongside some of the grafted ones in the greenhouses, that they wouldn't be doing so well, because the last couple of years, as I say, I've been a little bit suspicious that we might have one or two problems lurking there. The other factor is that the grafting process sets the plants back 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, it's pretty brutal, and it takes a few weeks before those plants pick up and then start growing away again. So the ungrafted plants, it's like they're about 3 weeks older, I would say. And if I did this comparison just maybe a week or two ago, actually the ungrafted plants would be looking rather better. But I think we're at the stage now where the grafted ones have caught up, and I think they're going to overtake. So anyway, let's take a quick look at some of the ungrafted plants first, and then we'll do an informal comparison. So this is one of the tallest of the plants in here. This must be, well, it must be 6 foot tall now, and I've got a bit of a decision to make here, because if I'm only going to grow these to this rail here where I've got these canes attached, then I need to stop this plant at this point, take out the growing point, and whatever fruit it's got, that's all it's going to get. But we're only in June, so I think I could let these grow on at least until the end of July, and I think these could grow quite a bit more in that time. The amount of growth they put on recently is quite impressive. They're fairly vigorous plants. This is a good sized stem. So I'm inclined to run some wires across here to the main ridge pole and allow these to grow on up at a bit of an angle here. So I've got a bit of work to do here to let those carry on. I mean, obviously at some point I need to stop this growing tip because I want the fruit to ripen, and many of the varieties in here are fairly large fruited sorts, so they do take plenty of time for the fruit to develop, and ripening is quite a slow process with these. Obviously much quicker with a cherry type. But I mean, this is a good sized plant. Now when I planted these, I sunk these pretty deep into the ground. They're already in good sized pots, big root systems. But you can see that this is a healthy, vigorous specimen. There are a few others that are more or less this same sort of height, and I think they are pretty much all healthy plants. And that will be largely due to the fact that this soil hasn't grown tomatoes before. So we've got some fruit starting to develop here. Oh, this is a nice looking fruit. There's a larger specimen on the bottom. You don't get a huge amount of fruit on some of these old varieties, and it'll be interesting to see whether the grafting is going to improve that. I'm not that worried. I really love the flavour and the character of these old heritage sorts, and I'm not too concerned about yield, but obviously I wouldn't mind a few more tomatoes. So that one is Canestrino de Luca, and it's doing pretty well. So this one is Belmonte. This is supposed to produce some pretty big fruit, but this is the second truss. So the first truss, I think, has a bit of a whopper on it. So that's a pretty good sized fruit, and you might just be able to make out that the shoulders are starting to colour up. So this could be one of the first to ripen. Here we've got Rosa di Sorrento. Again, a really big fruit on this one. And, well, there's quite a bit of fruit here. That doesn't look too healthy. I would take that off. This is quite typical. Once a few of these fruits have set, it tends to stop setting further fruit. That's nothing to worry about. It's just, I think, because these fruits are so large, the plant really can't cope with too many of them. And I'm wondering whether the grafted plants will do a little bit better in that regard. This one's Pantano. We've got quite a bit of fruit coming on that one. And again, good sized fruits. That's also Pantano. This one is Red Pear. Some slightly odd shaped fruits. This one in particular is rather weird, but I mean, these are doing quite well. I really can't complain. So I think from these ungrafted plants, I really wouldn't expect much better results than this. Lots of things have gone a little bit wrong this year, but the tomatoes are actually doing quite well, I think. And for heritage varieties, they're carrying a pretty big crop, so I'm quite happy with these. But now to the grafted sorts. So these have just about managed to catch up now. So I think these are the same sort of height broadly as those in the polytunnel. And it's taken them a while. So from the beginning, these have been playing catch up. But now I think they're going to overtake, because these stems are incredibly vigorous. These are good thick stems, and I think now that rootstock is starting to show some advantage. This is in soil that has grown tomatoes for years, and there's no sign of that weakness, that lessening of the vigor, or no sign of any significant disease on these. And I think at this stage, over the last, let's say, 2 seasons, I would expect to see a few problems starting to show up. So I'm pretty happy with these plants now. Some of these stems are really pretty monstrous. That is a really vigorous stem, and the growth on these has been really fantastic the last couple of weeks. Well, this is another really vigorous stem. This is Black Crim, and it's as wide as my thumb here, and time will tell, but I'm hoping that this vigorous growth is going to support a nice large crop. Now the same variety back in the polytunnel, the ungrafted sort, this is clearly not as vigorous. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this stem. This is a good healthy plant of a sensible sort of girth, but it's nowhere near the size that the grafted plant has achieved. So now to the fruit. This is the first truss on Pantano. This is rather smaller than on the ungrafted plants. We've got another truss coming here, and there is now plenty of fruit coming, but it's still behind the ungrafted plants. The neighbouring plant is also Pantano, and this first truss is only just getting going, really. This one is red pear. Now on the ungrafted plants, these are already pretty huge. Now there is plenty of fruit here. That's not a bad truss for one of these large fruited tomatoes. So that is a good sign, but the fruit development itself is a little bit behind. So the second truss is looking pretty good. These small ones here, they have also set. So I think these are doing rather better in terms of fruit set than the ungrafted plants. Then further up, we've got more fruit on the way. And that is not bad at all for these old sorts. So this one is Canestrino de Luca. I don't know what's going on with this first truss. Maybe nothing. The second one though has set some nice fruit, much smaller again than the ungrafted plants. This is also Canestrino de Luca. Some really nice fruit starting to develop there. They've got a long way to go. This has got to get much bigger yet. But again, plenty of fruit, just a little bit further behind. So just like the ungrafted plants, Rosa di Sorrento is producing some real whoppers, and I've had to give this a little bit of support here. I don't want to lose this fruit. This is probably at more or less the same sort of stage as the ungrafted plant. You might just be able to make out this line across the stem here. That is the graft union, and I've kept this a couple of inches above the soil level here so that we don't get rooting from the scion down into the soil. That would ruin our disease resistance. So I've had a look along all of these grafted plants. I've got a dozen in here, and I think I've got 16 next door. And all of those grafts are still sound. There's no sign of any problems there, either from poor grafting technique, which was quite possible, it was my first attempt, or from any sort of incompatibility between the scion and the rootstock. So that's really encouraging. I'm fairly confident at this stage in saying that these old heritage varieties will quite happily graft onto a modern rootstock. So a few weeks ago, I think the ungrafted plants might have had the edge, but now these grafted plants are really romping away. The stems, if anything, are more vigorous. Looking across the entire range, now I could of course go in, get the calipers out and go measuring these stem diameters, but I'm not going to do that. But I'm fairly confident in saying that these are of a larger diameter than the ungrafted plants now, and some of them are really quite impressive. In terms of fruit, well, apart from Rosa di Sorrento, which I think is at more or less the same stage, I think all of the fruit on the grafted plants is behind the ungrafted ones. That isn't surprising. These didn't have flowers on when they were planted. The ungrafted ones already had some fruit starting to develop. It's a little bit too early yet to talk about potential yield, but my feeling is when I look across these trusses that I've got better fruit set on the grafted plants. That of course is something one might expect. You're supposed to get improved yield on the grafted plants, and I think that could be quite an important factor on these heritage varieties. Most of what I'm growing here carry pretty large fruits, and on an ungrafted plant, once a few of those have set, it's really not that keen to set more. And because they are on the plant for so long, growing and then ripening, you tend to get a fairly mean crop. I mean, some years you'll get a couple of the trusses will set well, and then the plant just gives up. It thinks it's done its job and can sit back and relax. Well, I think the grafted plants are putting a lot more effort into those fruit trusses. I think I've got more fruit set pretty much across all of these plants. So these are also running out of height here, but I've got this trellising on the roof and I will run these on up for a little while. I'm not sure when I'm going to stop them. Obviously I have to stop them at some point to get the fruit that has set to ripen, and it does take a while with these large fruited sorts, but we're still in June, so I don't see any reason why I would stop these before at least the end of July, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're not quite a long way across the roof by then. And that could potentially be another, I don't know, another 3 trusses. Whether they will develop that much fruit, I don't know, but these grafted plants are really putting on some growth now, and it really wouldn't surprise me. And of course, as soon as I pinch that out, all of the energy of the plant is going to be going into whatever fruit has set. But I will come back to those later in the year and we'll see how they're doing again, run another comparison between the ungrafted and the grafted plants. At that point, I expect the comparison to be fairly clear. I think these are going to be much better, but time will tell. Anyway, that is all for this video. Thanks very much for watching, and bye for now.